so much for that. And you know, it does rain in Philadelphia too. Our next storyteller comes from the theatrical side of storytelling. She actually began as a mime. And now that she's talking, I call her the anti-mime. So, this is something really cool about her, though. She wrote a short play that made it into the finals of the 10-Minute Play Festival last month in Washington, D.C. I think I got it right. It's called Washing Up. And in fact, you can find the podcast on the Kennedy Center website, so that's really cool. Ladies and gentlemen, Milbre Burch.
Well, it's been wonderful to be here and now to be in this beautiful house with all your beautiful faces. Thank you for coming to listen, and thank you all for coming to tell and interpret. Thank you for the invitation. Tonight I'm going to finish a cycle of stories that I began at the Missouri Botanical Garden and then continued a bit today at the Pilot's Wheel. This is the Irish Cinder Lad story, collected by Seamus McManus and adapted by me. It's called Billy Beg and His Bull, and it goes like this. Long ago in Ireland, there lived a king and a queen, and they had one child, a boy, and they called him Billy Beg, which is kind of like saying little Bill. And when he grew from a baby to a boy, they began to ponder on what would be the proper pet for a prince. And after time, they decided to get him a bull calf. And so they did. And Billy Beg and his bull, they grew up together. And they were as close as brothers. But time passes in a fairy tale the same way it does in real life. And there came a day when the queen took sick and she knew she was going to die. And she called her husband to her bedside and she said, now I want you to marry again because I want you to be happy. But you must promise me that you'll never do anything to separate Billy Beg from his bull. For I love them both like they were my children. And the king he promised, for he loved them too. And so the queen died happy. And the kingdom mourned her. But time passes in a fairy tale, the same way it does in real life. And there came a day when the king married again. And I am sorry to tell you that the new queen did not take a shine to Billy Beg, nor to the bull. And she wanted a way to be rid of them both, but she couldn't think of it. So she called to her friend, the hen wife, which is kind of like saying a country doctor or a witch. And the two of them talked together, and they came up with a plan. They decided that the queen would say, oh, she was that sick, oh, she was going to die, oh, she must have a bottle of the blood of Billy Beg's bull. And so that's what she said. Went straight to bed, and she wouldn't get up again. And doctor after doctor came to tend to her, and none could do her any good. Until at last the king came to his son and he said, Billy Beg, it makes my heart sore. But tomorrow morning we must kill your bull so that we can give a bottle of his blood to my queen. Otherwise she will die, and I'll have her blood on my hands. And Billy Beg, he went into the barn and he stood by the bull. And he said, tomorrow they're going to kill you, and it breaks my heart. No more than wine, said the bull. And the two of them put their heads together to see if they couldn't come up with a plan. And so the next morning, just at dawn, it was Billy Beg himself who led the bull out of the stable into the center of the courtyard. And everyone came down to see this sad thing happen. And strange to say, that the queen felt well enough to come down on the arm of the hen wife. And the two of them stood right there in the doorway to the courtyard to watch this terrible thing. But as the man with a sharp, sharp knife came toward the bull said, jump, Billy Beg. And Billy Beg, he jumped astride the bull, and the bull jumped up 9 miles, and over 9 miles, and down 9 miles, and back 9 miles. And then they began to gallop about that courtyard, so everyone was scream and run for their lives. And do you know that they went straight through that doorway and trampled the queen and the henwife flat? And Billy Beg, he was holding on to the bull. And he said, well, I guess it's better if we don't go back there for a time. I wish I'd known I'd have packed a bag. And the bull said, Billy Beg, don't worry. Or if you reach in my left ear, you'll find a napkin. And if you unfold it, it'll give you a feast fit for a king. And if you reach in my right ear, you'll find a stick. And if you wave it over your head 3 times, it'll become a sword with the strength of 1,000 men. And Billy Beg said, oh, I feel better then. And so they rode off to a distant kingdom. And at last they stopped to sleep in a woods. Now Billy Beg's bull said, Billy Beg, there's a bull that lives in these woods. And tomorrow morning I must fight him. Now I think things will go well enough. But still, you had best climb a tree. So in the morning, Billy Beg, he climbed a tree. And here came the bull of the woods. And here came Billy Beg's bull. And they fought and they fought and they fought. The rocks into water and the rivers into mountains. And when they were done, the bull of the woods lay dead upon the ground. And Billy Beg, he climbed down. He said, well, I'm glad that's over. And the bull said, it's not. For tomorrow I must fight the brother of the bull of the woods. Still, I think it will go well enough. But you'd best climb a tree. So the next morning, Billy Beg, he climbed the tree. And here came the brother of the bull of the woods, and here came Billy Beg's bull. And they fought, and they fought, and they fought, and they fought. The water into stones, and the rivers into mountains. And when they were done, the brother of the bull of the woods lay dead upon the ground. And Billy Beg, he climbed down. He said, are we done yet? And the bull said, no, for this is a fairy tale and everything happens in threes. So tomorrow I must fight the brother of the bull of the woods. And Billy Beg, it will go ill for me. And I shall die. So when I'm gone, you must take the napkin and the stick. And you must cut a strip of my hide from my belly to my back. And wear it as a belt. And it will make you invincible, so that no one can harm you. And know that when you go out into the world, you take my love. And so they spent that last day and night singing songs and telling stories. And in the morning, Billy Beg, he climbed the tree. And here came the brother of Billy Beg's, of the bull of the forest. And here came Billy Beg's bull. And they must fight and fight and fight. And they fought and fought and fought. The stones into water. And the rivers into mountains. And I am sorry to tell you that at the end, Billy Beg's bull lay dead upon the ground. And the brother of the bull of the woods bellowed once and was gone. And Billy Beg, he climbed down that tree. And he dug a grave for his friend. And he took the napkin and the stick. And he cut a strip of the hide from the belly to the back, and he wore it proudly. And he buried his friend. And he said prayers over. And then he set out into the world, alone for the first time. Now when he came to the next town, he found a sign in the yard of a farm, man wanted, and he went up to the door and he knocked. Well, the gentleman farmer opened the door and he was glad to see such a big strapping boy standing out there with the biggest feet he'd ever seen. He said, "Oh, good, you're just the kind of boy I need." "What must I do?" said Billy Beg. "Well, you must take my cattle to the field every day and watch over them and bring them home at night and milk them well." "I can do that," said Billy Beg. "Well, there is a small problem," said the gentleman farmer. "You see, there are these 3 giant brothers, and they come every day, and they milk my cows so dry you can't drink anything at all." "Oh, that sounds troublesome," said Billy Beg. I'll do it, anyway. Now what's the wages? I don't know, said the gentleman farmer. You see, usually the giants eat my hired man. We'll talk about it later then, said Billy Beg. And you know, the next day he drove the cattle to the field, and he'd hardly got them settled to grazing when the ground began to shake. And he saw a giant with 3 heads. And they came up and said, Billy Beg, look at you! Too big for 1 bite, too small for 2. What shall we do? We'll fight, said Billy Beg. And he had his belt on, and he took a stick and he waved it over his head 3 times until it became a sword with the strength of 1,000 men. And then, whoop, 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 he took all 3 of the giant's heads right off. And then he took out the napkin and folded it out, and he spent the day feeding tidbits to the cows. And at the end of the day, he drove them home, and they had so much milk, they filled every container in the gentleman farmer's house. And he said, did you see nothing strange in the field today, Billy Beg? Nothing stranger than yourself. Well, you know, it's odd. I'm so used to hearing these 3 giants cry all the night. And tonight I hear but 2. Maybe one's gotten a job, said Billy Beg. Now the next day he drove the cattle across the road and into the yard. And you know, they hardly settled at all when the ground began to shake again, and this time there was a giant with 6 heads. And they said, Billy Beg, look at you. Too small for 1 bite, too small for 2. Well, said Billy Beg, we'll see what we'll do. And he took off all 6 of the heads of the giant. And then he sat and he made daisy chains to put round the necks of each of the cows. And at the end of that day, he drove them home again. And do you know, they filled up every container in that house, and they borrowed containers from everyone else in the village that they might hold all the milk. And the gentleman farmer, he said, it's strange. I'm used to hearing 3 giants cry all the night, and now I hear but 1. Maybe the other's going to visit his mother, said Billy Beg. Now the next day he drove the cattle across the road into the field, and they had hardly set foot when the ground began to shake, and here came a giant with 9 heads. And they said, Billy Beg, and that's as long as he let them speak, because he took all 9 heads right off. And then he spent the rest of the day making tunes up with all the cows' names in them. And then he drove them home that night, and that night they had so much milk that they overflowed every pot in the house, every pot in the village. Some of the milk flowed down to the river, and to this day you can find white salmon in that river. And now you know why. And the gentleman farmer said, you know, it's strange. I'm used to hearing 3 giants cry all the night, and tonight I hear the nun. Maybe he'll sleep better, said Billy Beg. And so after that they decided on wages. And in fact, in a time, the farmer began to think of Billy Beg as his own son. And he gave him the best of everything in the house. The finest suits, the finest horses to ride. But he had to leave Billy Beg wearing his own boots because the boy had such big feet he could wear no other. Now one day, Billy Beg was working in the field when he saw a whole crowd going by from the village down to a spit of land beyond the farm. He said, where are you going? They said, oh, it's an adventure. Today, the princess of our kingdom is going to be eaten by a dragon, and we're all going to watch. Do you want to come? He said, no. Oh, it's going to be good, though. There's a little boy who's borrowed a sword and borrowed a shield, and he's been practicing, and he says he's going to save the princess and marry her, and we want to see whether the dragon eats him first or second. Are you sure you won't come? And Billy Beg said, nah. And he let them go on. And then he went into the house and he put on the finest suit of clothes, though he had to wear his own boots. And he had on his belt, and he took his stick waved round his head till it became a sword with the strength of 1,000 men. And he climbed on the best of the horses, and he rode down to the spit of land, and there was the princess just on the rock. And she looked at him, and he looked at her, and they both blushed. And here was the little hero, the boy who'd been practicing with a sword and a shield, and he could barely lift them standing next to the well. And everybody everybody else was standing around like it was a party or a festival. And suddenly the sky began to darken, for the dragon had appeared, and do you know that it had 12 heads, and each one of them blew fire and flame and smoke, and everyone screamed and ran for their lives. And the little boy who'd been training with the sword, he went down the well and refused to come out. And that left just Billy Beg and the princess, and she looked at him, and he looked at her, and they both blushed. She said, "Is there no one then who'll rescue me?" He got off the horse and he took the sword, and when the dragon landed, he cut off all 12 of the heads. And then he went round and he cut off the tips of their tongues as well. And he put them in his pocket so he could prove he was a dragon slayer. And then he looked at the princess and she looked at him, and they both blushed. And he got back on his horse, but she didn't want him to go. And she stepped up next to him and she put her hand on his boot, and he rode right out of it. And about that time, the little boy from the village climbed out of the well, and he came over to the princess wearing his borrowed armor, rusting and dripping, and he said, "Hello, princess, I'm so glad you're still alive. Do you think we can get married?" And she said, "You don't fit the boots of the man I love." Now the next day, Billy Beg was working in the fields, and he saw another crowd. This time they were headed straight to the center of the town, where the castle was. He said, "Where are you going today?" They said, "Oh, it's a different kind of adventure. For the princess has a boot, and she says she'll marry the man who fits it. So we're all going to try. Want to come?" He said, "Nah," and he let them go on. But the last to come was an old granddad, dressed all in tatters and rags, and leaning on a stick. And when that old man passed Billy Beg, the boy called out and said, "Granddad, will you trade clothes with me?" Now Billy Beg, he had on a fine suit, and the old man was dressed in tatters and rags. And so he said, "You're making fun of me, and I'm going to have to hit you with my stick." And Billy Beg said, "No, Granddad, I mean it for true. I take your clothes and you take mine, and it's for good." And so they changed clothes. And do you know, the old man dressed in a fine suit walked with a much jauntier step. And Billy Beg wearing one boot and one bare foot, dressed in tatters and rags. Didn't he saunter down to the town? And didn't he saunter into the castle? And didn't he saunter into the throne room? And there was everyone with the long faces, for they tried on the boot and it didn't fit. And he looked at the princess and she looked at him, and they both blushed. She came over to him and set down the boot, and he stepped right into it. And of course it fit him. It was his own boot. And he took from his pocket the 12 tongues of the dragon, and he gave them to the king to prove he was a dragon slayer. And the princess held his hand and said, "Father, this is the man I love." And the king said, "But daughter, look at him. He's dressed in tatters and rags." "Well then, father," she said, "dress him in satins and silks." And so they did. And you know, once they dressed Billy Beg like a prince, he looked like one. And if you remember from the beginning of the story, he was one. And so they got married, and their wedding lasted 9 years, and 9 months, and 9 weeks, and 9 days, and I was there, and they gave me a pie for telling this lie.